The breaking point came on a cool Saturday morning in September. I was inside, half awake, brewing my first cup of coffee, when my phone buzzed with a motion alert from my backyard security camera. I glanced at the screen and nearly spit out my drink. There was Karen strutting around my yard like she owned the place, clipboard in hand, taking pictures of my garden shed. She was even jotting down notes, probably thinking she was starring in her own little episode of HOA Patrol. She was trespassing on my private property, again, all to document supposed violations for a house that didn't even belong to her HOA. I stepped out onto the back deck and called down to her, keeping my voice calm and polite, asking if she needed help with something. Karen spun around, utterly unbothered by being caught red-handed. Instead of embarrassment, she wore that smug little smirk of hers. She waved her clipboard triumphantly and announced that she had just documented 17 violations of HOA standards. According to her, my shed was an unapproved color, my garden decorations non-conforming, and, get this, my bird feeder was too tall by exactly 3 inches. When I pointed out that she was trespassing on private property, she laughed in my face and said in her most condescending tone that HOA officials had the right to inspect any property within the community. That's when I dropped the hammer. I told her calmly that I was a real estate attorney, specializing in property law and HOA disputes. The look on her face was priceless, a cocktail of shock, anger, and a tiny dash of fear. But Karen? She wasn't about to admit defeat. She puffed herself up and declared that she didn't care what I did for a living. "Rules are rules," she snapped, and I'd soon be getting over $3,000 in fines for my so-called violations. Then she stormed off, nearly tripping over my garden hose on the way out. What Karen didn't know was that I'd been preparing for this showdown for months, ever since her very first threatening letter. Every email, every voicemail, every ridiculous accusation. I had documented everything. My security cameras caught every instance of her stepping onto my property. I'd even gone a step further, hiring a private investigator to dig into her activities as HOA president. And what he found? Let's just say it was a gold mine. That Monday morning, Karen received 2 envelopes. The first was a formal cease and desist letter from my law firm, detailing her harassment, defamation, and repeated trespassing. The second was a lawsuit seeking damages for emotional distress, violation of property rights, and fraud related to her forged HOA documents. I also included charges for abuse of power in her role as HOA president. Her response came that same night. Karen called an emergency HOA meeting, turning it into her personal stage to play the victim. She ranted about how I was trying to destroy their community, and that the neighborhood had to unite to fight back against me, the supposed troublemaker. What she didn't count on was that I'd show up. I walked in just as she was wrapping up her fiery speech about protecting their way of life. The moment I entered, the room went dead silent. I calmly asked if I could address the association. Karen tried to shut me down, but several board members, clearly sensing the tides shifting, voted to let me speak. I laid out the facts one by one. I showed property records proving my house wasn't under their HOA jurisdiction. Then I revealed the forged documents she'd used to claim otherwise. Finally, I played the security footage, showing her trespassing in my yard, but the real bombshell was yet to come. My investigator had uncovered that Karen had been embezzling HOA funds for years, using association money for personal vacations, luxury home upgrades, and spa retreats, all while raising member dues under the excuse of maintenance costs. The room exploded. Neighbors who'd stayed silent for fear of retaliation suddenly found their courage. One by one, they stood up, sharing their own horror stories, bogus fines, bullying tactics, mysterious special assessments that vanished without explanation. An elderly woman began to cry as she described how Karen fined her $800 because her grandkids drew chalk art on her driveway. Then, I dropped one final piece of news. I'd already spoken to a local news station. They'd be coming tomorrow to interview anyone willing to speak on record about Karen's abuse of power. And as if that wasn't enough, I added that the district attorney's office had expressed interest in the embezzlement charges. The look on Karen's face at that moment? It was the exact opposite of the smug grin she'd worn that morning in my backyard. Karen's face went through every color in the spectrum, first red, then white, and finally an alarming shade of green. She tried to regain control, shouting over the noise that I had no right to interfere with HOA business. But it was too late. The damage was done. One of the board members stood up and, in a voice that carried across the room, called for an immediate vote of no confidence in Karen's leadership. The result was unanimous. Every hand went up except hers. In that single moment, her iron grip on the neighborhood shattered. The following weeks were a whirlwind. The local news story aired, featuring interviews with dozens of neighbors who finally felt safe enough to speak. Each one shared stories of Karen's intimidation, unfair fines, and manipulative tactics. The headline said it all: HOA President's Reign of Terror ends in scandal, and the hits just kept coming. The district attorney's office opened a formal investigation into the embezzlement allegations. One by one, more residents came forward with proof of fraudulent fines, fake invoices, and misuse of HOA funds. Meanwhile, my lawsuit moved forward at full speed. Karen tried desperately to hire a lawyer, but after 3 separate attorneys reviewed the evidence against her, they all refused to take the case. Left with no one willing to defend her, she made the fateful decision to represent herself. That went about as well as you'd expect. In court, she rambled about having implied authority over all neighborhood properties and claimed her actions were protected HOA business. She even accused me of waging a personal vendetta. The judge, unimpressed, listened patiently at first, but his expression grew darker with every word. Then came one of the most unforgettable moments of the entire case. Karen tried to submit a forged city document as evidence. The judge looked it over for maybe 30 seconds before setting it down and asking, in a calm but stern tone, whether she was seriously attempting to present fraudulent evidence to the court. Karen stammered something about having received it from City Hall, but when pressed for specifics, names, dates, anything, she came up empty. The courtroom was dead silent, save for the sound of her own panic. My attorney took it from there, methodically laying out our case. He presented the evidence of harassment through her endless letters and public humiliation tactics, the trespassing, all captured on camera, and the forged documents she'd created to justify false fines. Each piece of evidence painted a clearer picture of her abuse of power. When the judge finally turned to Karen and asked if she had any defense, she launched into a rambling monologue about maintaining property values and upholding community standards. He cut her off mid-sentence. The ruling came swiftly and sharply. The judge found in my favor on every count: harassment, defamation, trespassing, and emotional distress. Karen was ordered to pay $35,000 in damages and another $15,000 in legal fees. Then came the kicker. The court issued a permanent restraining order, forbidding her from coming within 100 feet of my property or contacting me in any way. But as satisfying as that was, it wasn't the end of Karen's troubles, not even close. The criminal investigation into her finances turned up shocking evidence. Over $100,000 in misappropriated HOA funds during her 8-year tenure. She hadn't stolen big chunks at once. Instead, she'd siphoned off small amounts here and there, quietly bleeding the association dry. She used HOA credit cards for personal shopping sprees, created fake invoices from shell companies she secretly controlled, and even submitted duplicate reimbursements for the same expenses. When the criminal trial began, it was even more damning than the civil case. Forensic accountants testified about the elaborate system she'd built to hide her theft. Former board members described how she'd bullied and intimidated them into signing off on her falsified reports without ever reading them. The prosecutor didn't hold back, painting a portrait of a woman completely consumed by greed and control, a self-appointed queen of the neighborhood who treated community funds like her personal piggy bank. Karen tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecution, confident they had her cornered, refused anything that didn't include serious jail time. The trial lasted 2 weeks. When the verdict finally came, the jury didn't hesitate. Guilty on all counts: embezzlement, fraud, forgery, and abuse of fiduciary duty. The sentencing hearing was packed. It felt like half the neighborhood had shown up to witness the moment justice was served. One by one, victims stood to give impact statements, telling the court about the fines, the fear, and the financial strain Karen's actions had caused. After listening to them all, the judge gave his final ruling. He sentenced Karen to 3 years in state prison and ordered her to pay full restitution of $123,000 to the HOA. The moment the words left his mouth, Karen's composure cracked. She collapsed into her chair, sobbing uncontrollably as the bailiff approached and placed her in handcuffs. Justice, finally, had caught up with her. If you enjoyed watching karma in action, hit that like button. And if you're into real-life neighborhood drama, don't forget to subscribe, because trust me, there's plenty more where that came from.